The morning of the 13th of December, 1939. The South Atlantic. A British heavy cruiser turns to close on a warship that outguns her in almost every measurable respect. Her own officers know the arithmetic. Her critics in Whitehall had questioned whether she was worth building at all. Some of her crew had served in ships with more firepower, more armor, more speed. And yet, on this particular morning, HMS Exeter was exactly where she needed to be. In 72 hours, she and two lighter cruisers would drive the most feared commerce raider in the German fleet into a neutral harbour from which it would never emerge. This is how a rejected cruiser changed the war at sea. To understand what Exeter was up against, you must first understand what the Admiral Graf Spee represented in December of 1939. The German Navy had been deliberately constrained by the terms of the Versailles Treaty, which imposed a 10,000-ton limit on capital warship construction. German designers responded not with obedience but with ingenuity. The result was a class of vessel that defied easy categorization, heavier than any cruiser, faster than any battleship, and armed accordingly. The British press, reaching for a term that captured the threat without quite admitting the embarrassment, settled on pocket battleship. The name was dismissive. The vessel was not. Graf Spee carried 6 11-inch guns in 2 triple turrets. Those guns could hurl a shell of roughly 300 kilograms to a range that exceeded the effective reach of any British cruiser likely to intercept her. Her designers had also fitted her with diesel engines, an unusual choice for a warship of her size, giving her a range and an endurance that made her extraordinarily difficult to corner in an ocean as vast as the South Atlantic. She displaced around 16,000 tons at full load, well in excess of the treaty limit her builders had agreed to observe. She was fast, heavily armored about her vitals, and she had already sunk 9 Allied merchant vessels since the outbreak of war in September, totaling over 50,000 tons of shipping. She was, on paper, precisely what the German Navy intended her to be, a raider that the Royal Navy could not afford to ignore and could not easily kill. On paper, Graf Spee's 11-inch guns outranged Exeter's 8-inch armament by a margin that should have settled any engagement before the British cruiser could close to reply effectively. On paper, Graf Spee's secondary armament, 8 5.9-inch guns, was heavier than anything Ajax or Achilles could bring to bear. On paper, the 3 British ships that would meet her in the River Plate estuary were outgunned, outranged, and facing a warship that had been at sea long enough for her crew to be thoroughly worked in. The outcome, by every conventional measure, was not supposed to be in doubt. HMS Exeter had been launched at Devonport in 1929, the second ship of the York class, a pair of heavy cruisers designed to carry the maximum permitted armament of 6 8-inch guns within the tight displacement constraints imposed by the Washington Naval Treaty. She was a compromise vessel from the moment her keel was laid. The treaty framework that shaped her design forced British naval architects into choices that satisfied neither the gunnery officers who wanted more barrels nor the admirals who wanted more armor. Exeter emerged from that process lighter than her contemporaries, with 6 8-inch guns arranged in 3 twin turrets, reasonable but not exceptional armor, and a design displacement that left little margin for the upgrades that later experience would have demanded. She had not been universally admired. The York class as a whole attracted criticism from naval planners who felt that 2 ships of limited capability represented poor value against the cruiser tonnage they consumed under treaty accounting. The cancelled 1957 frigate that was to have carried her name, ordered and then struck from the program before a keel was ever laid, was perhaps an unintentional commentary on how the Admiralty sometimes viewed the Exeter name, useful in principle, dispensable in practice. But the Exeter that sailed from the Falkland Islands on the 2nd of December 1939, under Commodore Henry Harwood's broad command, was not the paper ship that treaty accountants had debated. She had been refitted. Her fire control had been updated. Her crew had trained. And Harwood, commanding the South American division from Ajax, had spent weeks reasoning through the logic of where Graf Spee would eventually have to appear. The estuary of the River Plate, the broad, shallow approaches to Buenos Aires and Montevideo, was the focal point of the region's trade. If Graf Spee meant to continue her campaign against Allied commerce in the South Atlantic, she could not indefinitely ignore it. Harwood positioned his 3 cruisers accordingly: Exeter, Ajax, a Leander-class light cruiser launched in 1934, and Achilles, also a Leander-class cruiser launched in 1932 and operating under the White Ensign on loan to the Royal New Zealand Navy. The tactical plan Harwood had prepared for exactly this contingency was straightforward and deliberately cruel in its geometry. The 3 cruisers would not attack together in a single line, offering Graf Spee's gunners a concentrated target that could be engaged by a single fire control solution. They would split. Exeter would attack from one bearing, Ajax and Achilles from another, forcing the German ship to divide her main battery or accept being hit from an unengaged quarter. It was a plan that acknowledged the disparity in firepower and tried to make the disparity work against the enemy. Graf Spee could not point 6 11-inch guns at 2 separate targets simultaneously. What the plan required of Exeter was that she close the range quickly, absorb what came, and keep her own guns firing. That willingness to place a ship the critics had called marginal into the most dangerous position in the line and expect her to hold was itself a kind of answer to everyone who had doubted her. If you find that the ships the Admiralty nearly overlooked are often the ones that matter most when it counts, this channel will keep giving you those stories. Subscribing ensures you don't miss the next one. At 061 for hours on the 13th of December 1939, lookouts aboard Exeter sighted smoke on the northwestern horizon. Within minutes the silhouette resolved into something unmistakable. The signal went out. Graf Spee had been found. Graf Spee's captain, Hans Langsdorff, initially believed he was looking at a convoy escort group, destroyers or light cruisers, and turned to engage. The realization that one of the approaching ships was a heavy cruiser came too late to change his course without the appearance of retreat. The battle was joined. At 0618 hours, Graf Spee opened fire on Exeter at a range of approximately 19,000 meters. The first salvos were close. Exeter returned fire almost immediately, her 8-inch guns engaging at a range that was still at the outer edge of her effective envelope. Ajax and Achilles, closing from the northeast, brought their 6-inch guns to bear on Graf Spee's superstructure and secondary armament, forcing the German fire control teams to contend with threats from 2 directions simultaneously, exactly as Harwood had designed. The punishment Exeter absorbed in the first hour of the battle was severe. A direct hit on her forward turrets put B turret out of action early in the engagement. Successive hits caused flooding, fires, and casualties on her bridge. By 0700 hours she had lost the use of 2 of her 3 turrets, her communications were damaged, and she was steering by her engines alone after her steering gear was compromised. The dead on her decks numbered in the dozens. She continued to fight. With only her aft wide turrets still functional, Exeter pressed the attack. The hits she had scored on Graf Spee were accumulating. The German ship had taken damage to her fuel processing system, her ammunition handling arrangements, and her fresh water supply. Graf Spee carried Ajax and Achilles on her secondary battery while her main guns continued to work over the stricken Exeter, but the 2 lighter cruisers were fast, maneuverable, and relentless, laying smoke and altering course to complicate every German firing solution. Ajax herself lost 2 of her 4 turrets to German fire during the engagement, but she remained in the fight. By 0730 hours, Graf Spee had broken off and was making for the neutral port of Montevideo in Uruguay. She was not fleeing a defeated enemy. But she was not in a condition to continue raiding. Her captain assessed the damage, over 50 hits had been registered on the vessel, and made the judgment that Montevideo offered the only realistic option for repair. Ajax and Achilles shadowed her to the mouth of the estuary, maintaining contact through the night and into the following days while Exeter withdrew to Port Stanley and the Falklands to bury her dead and assess her wounds. The Battle of the River Plate lasted approximately 90 minutes of active gunnery. Exeter had expended the great majority of her 8-inch ammunition and had suffered 61 men killed. She was, by any structural assessment, a ship that had been fought almost to the limit of her endurance. Graf Spee lay in Montevideo harbour for 72 hours. The Uruguayan government, observing international neutrality law, allowed her only that time for emergency repairs before she must either sail or be interned. Captain Langsdorff concluded, on the basis of intelligence that suggested a far larger British force had assembled outside the estuary, that sailing was not survivable. On the 17th of December 1939, Graf Spee was scuttled in shallow water just outside the harbour mouth. Langsdorff died by his own hand 2 days later. The strategic consequences reached well beyond the South Atlantic. The threat to Allied merchant shipping that Graf Spee had represented was extinguished. The commerce raider campaign that the German Navy had hoped would stretch British naval resources across every ocean had produced, instead, a public and unambiguous British victory within 3 months of the war's opening. It demonstrated that trade protection was achievable even against sophisticated raiders, and it provided the Admiralty and the British public alike with something that was in very short supply in December of 1939, unambiguous good news. The 3 cruisers that Harwood had assembled for the purpose received battle honours. For Exeter and Ajax and Achilles, River Plate 1939 was added to the record alongside whatever had come before. Exeter herself would fight on. She would earn 2 more battle honours before the war claimed her, Malaya in 1942, and Sunder Strait in 1942, before being sunk on the 1st of March 1942 at the Second Battle of the Java Sea. She did not survive the war. But on the 13th of December 1939, with 2 of her 3 turrets silenced and her bridge a scene of devastation, the cruiser that critics had called too modest, too constrained, too much a product of compromise to be truly formidable, that ship closed the range on an 11-inch gun warship and refused to stop. Nobody who stood on that bridge in the River Plate, or who counted the hits on Graf Spee's hull afterwards, ever called her rejected again. Thank you for watching. If you want to be here for the next ship story, subscribing and turning on notifications is the simplest way to make sure you are.